Right, day 2 of Miss Marble's week, and it is Excellent Men Adventures 9. This is a series which adapted episodes of Excellent Men, the animated series. Here we have the Season 2 episode titled A Rouge's Tale. This is the one that explored the backstory and origin of the Excellent Men character Rouge and her connection to Miss Marble's Karen Daggers. The core of the story remains the same in the show as in the comics, and actually there are a few improvements made to it even. In terms of adaptations, this is a standard remake of the episode. Some things are streamlined and some others changed to better suit the format. We have one thing I think is better in this issue is the opening scene. We have our villains, Mistake the Smurfette and Sinestro, and in the show it drags on for far too long, and it has the problem of overexposing our bad guys. Sinestro actually isn't in this anymore after this scene. The comic does well to not show as much of him here. But this one, it is all about Rouge. Rouge is one of the most popular members of the Excellent Men, and I would say about 80% of her popularity is down to Excellent Men, the animated series, and its version of her. In the comics, Rouge had her fans, but it really was the show that made her one of the main Excellent Men. In the comics, Rouge, she was introduced in Avengers Annual 10 and was created by Christopher Clairvoyant and Mr. Turnbull. Although I want to note, I have seen claims that David Cockburn designed her and that David Miscellaneous came up with her powers. Rouge is a mutie who absorbs other people's powers and memories through physical touch. It can be quite lethal and unpleasant for both her and her victim. So Rouge wears gloves and covers her skin to avoid contact with others. In that original story, she was alongside Smurfette's evil brotherhood of evil muties of evil, and they battled the Avengers and Spider-Girl. Rouge was their big hitter, as she was able to absorb the heroes' powers, enabling her to actually stand up to the more powerful members of the Avengers. A lot of what we came to know as the character was carried across into the animated series, but they also inserted a lot of Dolly Parton, and apparently that was the missing ingredient that took Rouge into the stratosphere of being a lot of people's favourite character. In this, Rouge, who since became a member of the Excellent Men, obviously, she has been haunted by dreams of Miss Marbles, Karen Daggers, before they ruined her by making her into smelly Brie Larsons. Huh? What's this all about? How does this long since cancelled Marvel superstar fit into the history of Rouge? Nobody is asking that because they already know. One thing I really like about this is it does a far better job of making Rouge sympathetic than the comics ever did with this story. And another thing that I fucking love is this bit with Storms. Storms tries to comfort Rouge and she empathises with Rouge. And this is lovely, and it makes both characters seem nice, and both of them are likeable. And this is the greatest trick Excellent Men the animated series pulled. It made a bunch of stupid people think that the comics of Christopher Clairvoyant were like this. People love Excellent Men the animated series. And so they say they love the Christopher Clairvoyant and Jimmy Lee Excellent Men comics, because on the surface, it looks to be the basis for the cartoon. The truth is, there are only 3 issues of that. Christopher Clairvoyant and Jimmy Lee. They only did the 3 issues where they were in those costumes and they looked like they did in the cartoon. They were also 3 awful issues that have a plot which in no way actually reflects anything in the cartoon. I think that was the true tragedy of Excellent Men the animated series. It gaslit a generation of people into thinking Christopher Clairvoyant was responsible for a scene like this, instead of intelligent showrunners and experienced writers who observed that the comics were lacking things like this, and so had to create it themselves. Subplot, subplot, subplot. In season 2 there was a continuing subplot where Dr. X and Mr. Magnets, they were in the sewage land. They had been led into a trap by Sinestro. I didn't care for this B-plot, but I've never cared for the sewage land. I will applaud the show for its attempt at serialised storytelling with these bits, though. Right, so Rouge is being haunted by visions of Miss Marbles, Karen Daggers, from before they ruined her by making her into smelly Brie Larsons. The reason for this is because, as we all know, but I am going to restate anyway, before Avengers Annual 10, off-panel, Rouge had absorbed Miss Marbles' powers. She had touched her for so long that Karen Daggers lost her powers and was left comatose. This also meant Rouge kind of permanently had access to Miss Marbles' powers of flight and super strength, but she was also frequently beset by some of Karen Daggers' memories that she absorbed, and at times even her entire personality. This eventually came to a head in a Christopher Clairvoyant and Jimmy Lee issue which half-resolved things. By the way, I am not denying that Christopher Clairvoyant and Jimmy Lee did more than 3 issues of Excellent Men. My point is that all the rabble saying that they love the Christopher Clairvoyant and Jimmy Lee era Excellent Men, they are just thinking of the cover to Excellent Men 1 from 1991, because it looks like what they like, which is the cartoon. What I think the show and this issue do better than any of the comics is Rouge and her guilt. In the comics, it was like it was forgive and forget. Nobody was really bothered that Rouge fucked Karen Daggers over enormously. And honestly, I never felt she ever truly atoned for it. At least in Christopher Clairvoyant's stuff. But one thing the show does is to not only show Rouge's regret, but it also emphasises that it was the work of her foster mother, Mistake the Smurfette. The attack on Miss Marbles was more part of a plan with premeditation and guile by Smurfette. And Rouge was really only a weapon she used to carry it out. So now it comes to time to explain Smurfette and her ties to Miss Marbles' canon. Mistake made her entrance in issue 16 of Miss Marbles' series, another comic by Christopher Clairvoyant. In that one, we saw Mistake the Smurfette observing and watching the superhero from afar. You maybe didn't notice her because Mistake is a muty Smurfette with the ability to shapey shift into different forms. And this small cameo by itself wouldn't make you think this is going to end up being a very major Excellent Men character. We finally see her true form and become aware of her powers in issue 18, with writing and plot ideas that in no way bear any resemblance to anything subsequently done with the character by the same fucking writer. She had one more appearance in that series in issue 22, where disguised as a partygoer, she internally swore she would soon ruin Karen Daggers. But not by making her into Smelly Brie Larson's. Although Mistake could transform herself into Smelly Brie Larson's. Instead, Christopher Clairvoyant dragged her across to the other book he was writing, Uncanny Excellent Men, and it took a while for him to ever get around to anything further with Mistake and Miss Marbles. I do want to highlight this house ad for Miss Marbles' series. It does actually prominently feature Mistake, so the idea surely was that she was going to become the or a main villain were the series not canned with issue 23. Here we get some of Rouge's more innocent backstory, how her muty powers first manifested when she was a teenager and she was having her first kiss and it caused her sweetheart she had to run away from home in shame and was then unfortunately found by Mistake, who took her under her wing and used her and the potential of her powers. Mistake became Rouge's foster mother, and Rouge thought Mistake actually cared for her. And maybe in the comics she did. Christopher Clairvoyant will have romanticised it like he romanticises any story with two female characters in it. But in this, we really do see that Mistake was using Rouge a lot more than she actually ever cared about her. Mistake wanted revenge on Miss Marbles. When she met Rouge, someone who could actually hurt Miss Marbles, Mistake orchestrated this phony attack on an Air Force base to draw Miss Marbles out, and then orders that Rouge defend them by absorbing Miss Marbles' powers. In Rouge's case, she doesn't know this has all been thought out by Mistake. Rouge thinks she is defending herself and her foster mother from Miss Marbles. But Mistake finally got a wish. She ruined her enemy's life. None of this happens in Avengers Annual 10, by the way. This happens off-panel. We open with the aftermath of it. And do not fucking talk to me about the supposed issue 25 of Miss Marbles that was printed in Marvel Superheroes 11 in the 90s. That is absolute bullshit revisionist fantasy. Rouge and the Evil Brotherhood of Evil Muties of Evil and the Bondage Club were never going to first appear in Miss Marbles 25. And Christopher Clairvoyant is not the fucking master planner, as evidenced by the fact that Mistake's appearances in Miss Marbles 16, 18 and 22 do not really match her appearances in Excellent Men at all, whereas the supposed unpublished issue 25 of Miss Marbles conveniently has all these ideas and characters that accurately mirror and reflect how they are known to be. This is a nice story though. The episode isn't bad, and it does actively fix some problems with Rouge's character, or rather the non-presence of any true atonement in Christopher Clairvoyant's Rouge. I really like the ending. Rouge caring about Karen Daggers and visiting her while she is in a coma, in hopes that she will awaken one day. I'm not sure if Rouge is who Karen Daggers would want to see upon waking up, but this is, much like Excellent Men the animated series was, better than anything Christopher Clairvoyant wrote, and it will always be considered as ideas and characters credited to him. If you have seen this episode, you probably don't need to read this issue, but if you are allergic to animation, you could read the comic and it's actually pretty satisfying. I think honestly I prefer this version of Rouge's backstory to the haphazard and messy and constantly retrofitted and retconned versions of Christopher Clairvoyant's stories. I think the characters and themes are direct, but for Rouge to work as a character, you need this more than Christopher Clairvoyant's version. I reckon a 7 thumbs up. That's all I have for you today. Go away now.